Am I the asshole for refusing to pay a $550 restaurant bill on my girlfriend's birthday after being blindsided by her expectation to cover the entire dinner for her friends and family? Last week was my girlfriend's birthday, and she'd been planning something special for a while. She decided on a dinner at a restaurant she'd been excited to try for months. It was an upscale spot, but not overly extravagant. A nice mix of elegance and comfort. She organized a group invite, and soon there was a confirmed guest list of about 10 people, including her sister, a few nearby cousins, and her closest friends. It seemed like a great idea, and I was fully on board. I loved seeing her excited, and spending time with the people she cares about felt like the perfect way to celebrate her big day. On the night of the dinner, I picked her up from her place, and she looked absolutely stunning. She had really gone all out. Her dress was this perfect blend of elegance and fun, which matched her personality to a T. Her makeup was flawless, subtly enhancing the features I already adored. She could have stepped straight out of a fashion spread. Her excitement was contagious. Her face lit up with pure joy, and I could tell she'd been looking forward to this night for a long time. Her energy was magnetic, and it was impossible not to feel swept up in her happiness. We got to the restaurant a little early, checked in with the hostess, and I watched as my girlfriend took it all in, already envisioning the amazing evening ahead. It wasn't long before her guests began to arrive. Her sister was the first, and they exchanged a heartfelt hug, the kind that only siblings can share. Soon after, her friends and a couple of cousins, who had driven in from a nearby town, joined us. The atmosphere was warm and joyful, filled with the kind of energy that only comes from close friends and family gathering together. There were hugs, handshakes, and laughter as everyone settled in, and it truly felt like the start of a magical evening where everything just clicked. Once everyone was seated, the drinks started flowing almost immediately. It was clear everyone was ready to make the most of the celebration from the get-go. Cocktails, wine, and beers were being ordered enthusiastically. While I would have loved to join in, I had to stick with a single glass of wine since I was driving later. Honestly, I didn't mind. It gave me the chance to sit back and watch everyone have a great time. Drinks were being shared across the table, with people laughing and tasting each other's orders. The waitstaff barely left before being called back for more rounds, and the energy made it feel like the night was just getting started, even an hour in. As the appetizers came out, the table was buzzing. We had a variety to share: sliders, gourmet flatbreads, seafood bites, and everyone dug in, passing plates around and sampling each dish. My girlfriend was glowing, her laughter filling the room as she joked with her friends and teased her sister about some inside story. Drinks kept coming, the chatter grew louder, and the atmosphere was full of warmth and joy. It was one of those nights where everyone was completely in the moment, savoring the food, the drinks, and the shared laughter. When the entrees arrived, they were just as impressive. From creamy pasta to perfectly cooked steaks, everyone was thrilled with their meals. My girlfriend lit up when her dish was placed in front of her, clearly excited to try something she'd been looking forward to. Her reaction after the first bite said it all. It was exactly what she had hoped for. Then dessert came, and she went all out, ordering a towering slice of chocolate cake with a sparkler on top. It caught everyone's attention, and the table burst into cheers as the server brought it over. She took a bite, closed her eyes in bliss, and then insisted on sharing it with the group, turning it into a fun, messy moment of forks flying in from every direction. As the evening started to wind down, I noticed something odd. Guests were gathering their coats, saying goodbyes, and heading toward the door. But no one seemed to be looking at the check. It was like everyone assumed someone else would take care of it. Confused, I lightly called out, "Hey, don't forget the bill, guys." But before anyone responded, my girlfriend stepped in and told me not to worry. She spoke with such ease, like it was no big deal, and turned to me with a calm expression I didn't recognize. "You should just cover it as a birthday gift, babe," she said casually. "You make more than anyone else here, so it's not a big deal, right?" Her tone was light and confident, like this had been her plan all along, and I was just catching up. I was stunned. My mind reeled as I replayed every conversation we'd had about this dinner, looking for any sign that this was expected. But there was nothing. No mention, no hint, no heads up. And yet, here I was, expected to cover a $550 bill, most of which came from endless rounds of drinks I hadn't even touched. As the designated driver, I'd only had one glass of wine and a modest meal. The expectation hit hard, but what hurt even more was the way she looked at me, like my hesitation was unexpected and, frankly, disappointing. It wasn't even framed as a question, favor, or request. It was simply an expectation. Her reasoning? You make more than anyone here. As if my income meant I should be completely fine with dropping that kind of money on the spot without warning. There wasn't even a hint of acknowledgement that it was a big ask or any appreciation for what she was suggesting. Just a calm, confident assumption that I'd go along with it because, in her eyes, I could afford to. In that moment, my mind raced. If she had asked me beforehand, something like, "Would you mind covering this as a birthday gift?" I might have considered it. Maybe I would have agreed, or at least contributed more if we'd split it. But to have her decide for me, to assume I'd be okay with paying for everyone without a conversation, felt incredibly unfair. It was like I wasn't part of the decision at all, just a cog in her plan. The disregard stung. It wasn't about whether I could afford it. It was about being blindsided. The assumption that I'd provide without a second thought felt like a complete lack of consideration for me as her partner. Watching her stand there with that calm certainty only made it worse, as if she thought I was the unreasonable one for hesitating. I tried to stay composed, while her friends and family were still hugging, laughing, and saying their goodbyes. I didn't want to make a scene on her birthday, especially not in front of her loved ones. But the frustration was building. I could feel it bubbling under the surface as I tried to act like everything was fine. She must have picked up on my hesitation, though, because she gave me a genuinely puzzled look, like she couldn't understand why I wasn't just going along with her plan. It was as if my reaction, not her assumption, was the odd thing. Taking a deep breath, I decided to stay calm and keep it simple. "Look, I'll pay for my meal, yours, and the tip, but that's all I'm covering." Her expression shifted, and I could see the disbelief in her face. But I didn't give her a chance to argue. I quietly pulled out my card, paid for the two of us, left a generous tip, and left the rest of the bill for her and her friends to handle. A part of me felt a twinge of guilt, not for the money, but because I could feel the tension between us. I knew she was tipsy and likely wouldn't fully process everything at that moment, but I felt like I had no other choice. The walk back to the car was quiet and tense, the air heavy with unspoken words. She was clearly annoyed, maybe even embarrassed, and she kept glancing at me like she expected me to change my mind or apologize. But I couldn't. With every step, my frustration hardened. The unspoken expectations, the lack of communication, it was too much to brush off. When we got to the car, I opened the door for her out of habit, but the gesture didn't ease the tension. She slid into the passenger seat, clearly irritated, and I got behind the wheel, focusing on driving us back to my place. Once home, she hinted that she wanted to stay up and talk or maybe have a drink, but I was done for the night. She was still tipsy, alternating between irritation and confusion, and I could tell she was waiting for me to bring it up, but I didn't have the energy to rehash everything. I told her I was tired, kept my tone neutral, and headed straight to bed. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop replaying the night in my head. The assumption that I'd just pay for everyone, the way she looked at me like I was being unreasonable, it all looped in my mind. I closed my eyes, hoping sleep would bring some clarity, but it was a restless night. The next morning, I woke up early, much earlier than she did, and got ready for work quietly. A part of me was relieved that she was still asleep. I wasn't ready to talk about it yet. I needed time to process what had happened. I grabbed my things, left the apartment, and headed to work, hoping to clear my mind with a busy day. But even at my desk, I couldn't shake the frustration. My phone buzzed several times throughout the day with messages from her. Each one seemed more insistent than the last, asking why I was upset or why I'd been so distant. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. As I thought about it more, I realized this wasn't just about the $550 bill. Sure, I earn a good salary, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the lack of communication, the assumption and the disregard for how I might feel being put on the spot like that. It left me questioning how much she truly considered me in her decisions. The more I reflected, the more I saw that this wasn't just about one night. It was about feeling like I was expected to provide without question, rather than being treated as an equal partner in our relationship. That realization, more than anything, is what kept me from responding to her texts that day. But the issue didn't stop there. Throughout the day, my phone was constantly buzzing with messages, and the frustration I'd been trying to push aside started building again. First, a few texts came in from her friends, then some social media notifications, and to my surprise, even messages from her family. It was clear that everyone had heard a version of what happened, and from their tone, it seemed like I was being cast as the bad guy. One friend texted, "You know, it was her birthday. Couldn't you have been a little more generous?" Another added, "It's not like you can't afford it." The comments carried this accusatory undertone, as if my hesitation to cover the entire bill was proof of some flaw in my character. One friend even sent a direct message saying, I needed to loosen up and show her I cared, throwing in that it shouldn't be a big deal considering my income. That message stung the most. Not only was my salary being used to justify their expectations, but it was being tied to how much I supposedly cared about her. The implication that my love or care could be measured by how casually I could drop hundreds of dollars infuriated me. It reduced my value as a boyfriend to how willing I was to pay for everyone without question. And the messages didn't stop with her friends. A couple of her family members chimed in too, sending subtle reminders about how special birthdays are, or more direct comments like, "Sometimes you just need to step up and do what's expected." The fact that her family felt comfortable weighing in on such a private matter left me feeling exposed and misunderstood. It was as if they had already judged me, decided that I'd failed as a partner, all based on her version of events. No one seemed to pause and ask why I might have felt blindsided or uncomfortable. Instead, the narrative seemed to be that I'd simply refused to make my girlfriend happy, and therefore, I was in the wrong. What made it worse was knowing that if she'd just talked to me about this beforehand, things might have gone differently. If she had hinted that she'd like me to cover the bill as a gift, I could have thought about it, maybe worked out a compromise. But that conversation never happened. Instead, I was put on the spot, expected to pay for everyone without question. Now, not only was I dealing with the frustration of that moment, but I also had to face the backlash from her friends and family, who had only heard her side of the story. Each message I received felt like another jab, a reminder that my feelings weren't being considered. Everyone seemed to think that because I made a good income, my financial position should automatically mean I'd pay without hesitation. But that wasn't the point at all. I wasn't upset about the money. I was upset about the assumption, the lack of respect for my choice in the matter. It felt like my boundaries and feelings were completely disregarded, like my role in the relationship had been reduced to the provider. The more I thought about it, the more I realized what really hurt. It wasn't just the act of being put on the spot. It was what it implied about how she viewed me. Did she see me as her partner or simply as someone to rely on financially? Did her family and friends expect me to always step up just because I earned more? It left me questioning whether we truly shared the same values. Her reaction that night, the look of surprise when I hesitated, kept replaying in my mind. To her, this wasn't supposed to be a discussion. She seemed to think my paying was automatic, unquestionable. And now, with her friends and family echoing her perspective, it felt like I was up against an overwhelming wave of judgment. The idea of communicating with me beforehand, of treating me as an equal partner with a choice, didn't seem to occur to anyone. Am I the asshole for not paying the entire bill at the restaurant? Or am I justified in feeling blindsided and hurt by the way it all played out? Update. As days went by, the tension between us became more noticeable. Although the texts and comments from her friends and family eventually stopped, the silence that followed was even heavier. She never brought up the dinner or the bill directly, but the strain between us was obvious. She avoided eye contact, let out the occasional passive-aggressive sigh, and there was this unspoken resentment lingering whenever we were in the same room. I could tell she was waiting for me to say something, to apologize or backtrack on how I'd handled things, but I didn't. For me, the principle of what had happened still weighed heavily. I had hoped that giving each other some space might help us both cool down and gain some perspective, but instead, the distance seemed to make things worse. Rather than reflecting on my side of the situation, she appeared to grow more indignant. Her body language shifted, more rigid, more closed off, and it felt like she was waiting for me to give in, to admit I was wrong and somehow make things right in her eyes. Eventually, the silence broke. One evening, as we were getting ready to head out for a casual dinner with friends, she turned to me with a serious expression. Her tone was calm, but carried a weight that told me what she was about to say wasn't going to sit well. She told me that because I hadn't covered the entire bill for her birthday dinner, I still owed her a proper gift. She explained that covering just her meal and the tip didn't count because it had caused awkwardness when the other guests had to pay their shares. In her view, my contribution that night didn't qualify as a gift at all. Her words felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe that after everything I'd already paid, a substantial amount by any standard, she was standing in front of me, calmly insisting that I still hadn't done enough. What baffled me even more was her dismissal of how significant the cost had been. To her, $550, even though it had been split between just our meals and a generous tip, wasn't enough to show I cared. She fixated on the fact that I could have paid the whole bill but chose not to, interpreting it as proof that I wasn't willing to go the extra mile to celebrate her. It was as though she had assigned a dollar value to my feelings, and because I hadn't reached that threshold, my efforts didn't count. I was floored. The idea that she could overlook my presence at the dinner, the time I'd spent celebrating with her friends and family, and focus solely on the amount I hadn't spent was deeply upsetting. It felt like she wasn't seeing the bigger picture. Instead, she reduced the evening to a transaction, judging my worth as a partner by how much money I was willing to spend. In that moment, I realized just how much our values and expectations clashed. To me, gifts weren't defined by their price tags or grandeur. I'd celebrated with her, tried to make her feel special, but I also needed to respect my own boundaries. By paying for just our meals, I thought I'd struck a balance between making her happy and being fair. But instead of seeing that, she viewed it as a failure, an insult to her and her expectations. I felt like I was seeing her in a new light, and not in a good way. This wasn't just about the birthday dinner anymore. It was about how she viewed me, our relationship, and even money itself. There was an underlying expectation that because I earned more, I should be willing to spend freely without consideration for my own comfort. And now, because I hadn't met that expectation, she was telling me I owed her something more. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was overthinking it, that there was some miscommunication at play. But the calm, entitled way she told me I still owed her another gift left no room for doubt. She truly believed that her happiness, her sense of being celebrated, depended on whether or not I'd covered the full bill. Because I hadn't, I was being treated like I'd let her down completely. This was supposed to be a joyful moment, a time for us to celebrate her birthday and our relationship. Instead, it felt like I was being reduced to a financial figure, my worth measured solely by the size of my wallet. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being asked to prove my love through money, rather than through any genuine connection or effort. As much as I wanted to smooth things over, to make her feel appreciated, I couldn't bring myself to meet her new demand. I didn't want to set a precedent where I felt pressured to validate our relationship through expensive gestures. So, after taking a moment to collect my thoughts, I told her firmly that what I had paid at the restaurant was my gift. I wouldn't be buying her anything else, and I wasn't going to apologize for respecting my boundaries. Her disappointment was written all over her face, but I didn't waver. In that moment, I knew this was about much more than one dinner or one birthday. It was about the kind of relationship we were building, and I couldn't allow my value as a partner to be tied to my financial contributions. Whether she understood that or not, I wasn't sure. But I knew that this was a line I couldn't cross, no matter the consequences to our relationship. Commentary time. The story dives deep into the complexities of expectations, communication, and the tension that can arise when money becomes a measure of affection. OP clearly adores his girlfriend and was genuinely excited to celebrate her special day with her loved ones. He didn't hesitate to make the night meaningful, but the evening took a sharp turn when an unspoken expectation was suddenly dropped on him. Imagine sitting at a celebratory dinner, enjoying the shared joy of a birthday, only to find yourself unexpectedly expected to foot a $550 bill for everyone, without so much as a heads up. It's not about whether OP could afford it. It's about being blindsided. Relationships thrive on mutual respect and communication. In this case, both seem to have taken a back seat. What stands out most is how OP's girlfriend dismissed the effort and consideration he did put into the evening. He paid for her meal, a generous tip, and participated fully in the celebration. Yet she brushed that aside as inadequate. This wasn't about money. It was about a lack of communication and the assumption that OP's financial standing automatically made him responsible for everyone's tab. It raises the question, where do you draw the line between generosity and being taken for granted? The aftermath only deepens the issue. Rather than discussing things openly, OP is met with passive-aggressive behavior, judgment from her friends and family, and an additional demand for a real gift to make up for his supposed shortcomings. The fact that his love and effort are being measured against his willingness to pay for others' indulgences speaks volumes about the underlying issues in the relationship. This situation shines a light on an important dynamic in relationships: respect for boundaries. It's one thing to celebrate and treat your partner, but it's another to feel coerced into meeting unspoken financial expectations. OP's decision to stand firm despite the backlash reflects his commitment to fairness and healthy boundaries, an essential foundation for any partnership. Do you think OP was right to stand his ground? Or should he have gone along with his girlfriend's expectations for the sake of her birthday? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you've ever been in a similar situation, share your story. We'd love to hear how you handled it. And don't forget to like this video. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into real-life dilemmas. And hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Let's keep the conversation going.